There is a version of you that no one has met yet. She doesn't cry over people who left without explanation. She doesn't lose herself trying to be understood. She doesn't react to every word thrown at her just to prove a point. She is soft but unshakable. She is soft but unshakable. She is kind but immovable.
She is emotional but not ruled by emotion. And here's the truth most people never tell you. You don't become unstoppable by avoiding emotions. You become unstoppable by mastering them. You see, emotions are not the enemy. They are messengers, teachers.
But when you hand them the keys to reactions, they will drive you straight into chaos. That's how most people live, like emotional hostages pulled around by every feeling that rises inside them. One bad text, they spiral. One cold tone, they explode. One cold tone, they explode. One moment of loneliness, they crawl back to the very people who broke them. This is what happens when emotion becomes the master and you become the servant. But discipline, emotional discipline, that's what separates the powerful from the reactive. That's what separates the woman who leads from the girl who begs to be seen. Because when you're not in control of your emotions, you can be easily controlled by anyone who knows how to push your buttons. They ghost you. You lose confidence. They insult you. They act distant, and you chase, and the cycle repeats. Not because you're weak, but because no one taught you that real power begins when you choose peace over panic. When you respond instead of react, when you feel everything but choose what gets your attention. Emotional discipline is the power to feel heartbreak, but still walk away from what you know is beneath you. It's the strength to feel anger, but still choose silence because not everyone deserves your energy. It's the maturity to feel fear, but still take the step forward because growth is bigger than your comfort. And this is what most women aren't told. The world tells you that strong women are loud, unapologetic, fierce, but some of the strongest women I've ever met were soft spoken, calm, still. They weren't loud. They were grounded. They weren't rude. They were clear. They weren't controlling. They were in control of themselves. That's the difference. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you stopped being emotionally available to everything? What if you only gave your energy to what aligned with your peace? What if your emotions stopped driving you and started guiding you? Because that's the shift. That's the moment you become dangerous. Not when you become heartless. Not when you shut down emotionally. But when you start feeling everything fully yet refusing to act from chaos. This kind of power is quiet, it's not dramatic, it doesn't need revenge, it doesn't seek attention. It walks away without needing to explain, it says a no without guilt, it chooses boundaries over pleasing. It chooses silence over proving, and people won't know how to handle it. Because most people are used to emotional chaos, they feed off it. When you stop reacting, you become unpredictable. And unpredictable people, powerful. Emotional discipline isn't about pretending not to care. It's about caring deeply, but choosing who and what gets access to that care. It's about learning that your energy is a currency and not everything deserves your investment. That argument? Not worth it. That person who tried to trigger you, let them drown in their own noise. That mood swing someone projected onto you, return it to sender. It was never yours to carry. You owe it to yourself to protect your nervous system, to protect your peace, to protect the progress you've made. And yes, it's hard at first. Especially if you're used to reacting, over-explaining, overthinking. But remember this, you're not healing so you can win every fight. You're healing so those fights don't even invite you anymore. Because once you master your emotions, you start to see things clearly. You realize that not every message deserves a reply. Not every person deserves your presence. Not every situation deserves your reaction. You begin to see the patterns, the people who used your empathy against you. The ones who tested you, not because they wanted you strong, but because they wanted control. The ones who triggered your emotions just to keep you chasing. But when you become emotionally disciplined, the game ends. Because you're no longer playing, you're watching, observing, choosing. You're choosing to preserve your softness without being manipulated, to be kind without being walked over, to be vulnerable without being unstable. This is the real glow up, not the body, not the makeup, not the wardrobe. It's when you stop handing your emotions to people who didn't earn your trust. It's when you stop needing to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. It's when you start seeing silence as strength and distance as protection. Now listen, this kind of growth will make you outgrow people fast, because people who knew the reactive version of you, they'll feel threatened by the calm version.
The version who doesn't respond to bait. The version who's not desperate to be liked. The version who trusts herself enough to let it go. But don't shrink for their comfort. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them wonder why you don't engage anymore. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them lose access. Because emotional discipline means you're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You're more committed to being at peace. At peace. And that peace is not cheap. It was built through tears, boundaries, therapy, reflection. It was built through lonely nights, silent goodbyes, and the courage to walk away when your heart still cared. So don't trade that peace for temporary drama. Don't trade it for people who confuse attention with love. Don't trade it for moments of validation that come at the cost of your dignity. You've come too far for that. You've learned that it's better to sit in silence with your dignity than argue for your worth with someone who doesn't see it. You've learned that it's better to pause than to say something you'll regret. You've learned that space is sometimes the best answer because it speaks the loudest. This is what becoming emotionally unstoppable looks like. It's calm, it's clean, it's quiet, and it's something no one can fake. So if you're in a season where your emotions feel heavy, remember this. Don't suppress them. Don't shame them. Don't fear them. Just learn to observe them. Learn to pause. Learn to ask yourself, is this emotion trying to teach me or control me? And from that place, choose how you respond. Every moment you choose peace over panic. Every time you choose reflection over reaction. You are rewiring your power. You are building discipline. You are becoming untouchable. Because when you master your emotions, you master your life. And when you master your life, you become unstoppable. Aim back to your life. There is a quiet transformation that happens when a woman starts to heal. It's not loud. It doesn't happen in public. It doesn't require applause. It happens in the silent moments. When she pauses before speaking. When she breathes before replying. When she walks away. Not because she's weak, but because she's learned her worth. This is the shift, from reaction to response. It is one of the most powerful transitions a woman can make. And when it happens, she becomes unrecognizable to the version of herself that used to flinch at every word, chase every explanation, and fight every battle that wasn't even hers. Reaction is what the world teaches you. Be quick, defend yourself, get the last word. Don't let anyone walk over you. But what they don't teach you is that most people are reacting from wounds, not wisdom. Most people argue not to solve anything, but to win. They project their pain. They provoke you, hoping to pull you into their chaos. Because if you lose your calm, they get to feel in control. And for a long time, you may have played into that. You explained yourself endlessly. You tried to fix the misunderstandings that were never real to begin with. You gave energy to arguments just to feel seen. But now, you're tired. You're not angry. Just done. Done explaining your piece. Done defending your softness. Done sacrificing your energy for people who never deserved your reaction in the first place. Because reaction is emotional impulse. But response is emotional mastery. Reaction comes from habit, trauma, insecurity. Response comes from awareness, healing, alignment. The woman who reacts is still trying to survive. The woman who responds has learned how to thrive. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes after you've been drained too many times, after you've walked away from a fight with nothing but regret, after you've realized that some people are just addicted to triggering you, not because they hate you, but because they hate themselves. You realize not everything deserves your attention. Not every comment deserves a clapback. Not every situation is worth your peace. So you start practicing the pause, that space between what someone says, and how you choose to respond. That sacred moment where you check in with yourself before letting your emotions drive your next move. And in that pause, something incredible happens. You take your power back. You stop being predictable. You stop letting people control your mood. You stop being emotionally available to every energy that wants access to your nervous system. You become intentional, selective, grounded. When you make this shift from reaction to response, your life changes in ways that are almost spiritual. You notice how people stop playing games with you because they no longer get the reaction they used to feed on. You notice how silence becomes your loudest boundary because people feel it when they lose access to your energy. You notice how peace starts to feel more satisfying than being a right. This is the true glow up. Not just looking unbothered, but actually being unbothered because you trust yourself enough to pause, to reflect, to understand the difference between your truth and your triggers, There's a version of you who used to spiral when someone gave you the silent treatment. Now, you lean into your own silence. There's a version of you who used to over-explain when misunderstood. Now, you understand that clarity doesn't require convincing. There's a version of you who used to argue just to feel seen. Now, you know that your worth is not up for debate. This is the power of response, because response is not weakness, it's not suppression, it's not avoidance. It's knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to walk away. Sometimes the highest form of self-respect is protecting your peace, even when your ego wants to speak. You begin to realize that people will test your boundaries to see if you still bleed where you've healed. But you don't. Not anymore. Not anymore. Now, when someone tries to trigger you, you breathe. You feel it. You acknowledge it. But you don't give it your energy. Because not every emotional invitation deserves your RSVP. Not every battle is your battlefield. Not every storm deserves your thunder. The shift from reaction to response is about choosing long-term peace over short-term satisfaction. Yes, it feels good to clap back. Yes, it feels good to prove your point. Yes, it feels good to show them you're not the one. But do you know what feels better? Walking away with your dignity? Walking away with your dignity? Keeping your nervous system intact. Sleeping at night without regret. You weren't born to argue. You weren't born to constantly defend your emotions. You were born to feel, to know, and then to choose wisely. Because the power is in the pause. It's in the moment you want to scream but choose silence. It's in the moment you want to run back but stay still. It's in the moment you want to react, but instead you reflect. This shift doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. It makes you precise. It makes your energy sacred. It makes your time valuable. You begin to realize not every fight is worth winning if it costs your inner peace. Not every conversation needs closure. Some just need distance. Not every opinion matters, especially when it's from someone you wouldn't trade places with. You choose to respond from power, not pain. From clarity, not confusion. From self-worth, not self-doubt. And this changes everything, because now you're not easy to shake. You're not easy to read. You're not easy to bait. And that terrifies people who once fed off your emotional chaos. You've become stable, a storm that no longer breaks its own foundation, a flame that knows how to warm without burning itself out, a woman who knows her emotional triggers and refuses to hand them to anyone else. This is emotional intelligence. As this emotional intelligence, this is healing. This is evolution. So when someone says something to provoke you, pause. When someone ghosts you, pause. When someone betrays you, pause. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that how you respond shapes who you become. And you're not becoming someone who reacts from ego. You're becoming someone who responds from soul. So let the world wonder how you stayed calm. Let them guess why you didn't flinch. Let them whisper about your silence. Because your peace is your power. Your stillness is your strength. And your response, not your reaction, is what makes you truly unstoppable. There is a kind of woman who doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. She doesn't need to enter the room loudly, doesn't need approval, doesn't need to compete. And yet, everyone feels her presence. They feel her calm. They feel her calm. They feel her self-control. They feel her power, not in what she says, but in what she chooses not to say. That is the woman who has mastered herself. And when you master yourself, your mind, you master yourself. Your mind, your emotions, your reactions, you no longer chase power. You become it. Because the most magnetic, unshakable woman in the room is the one who has nothing to prove. You see, the world will always try to test your peace. There will always be people who want to see if you still bleed where you've healed. They'll try to provoke the old version of you. The one who argued, cried, begged, or over-explained. But when you've done the work, when you've sat in silence long enough to meet yourself, when you've chosen discipline over drama, you don't rise to every challenge. You don't rise to every challenge. You rise above it. Because you now understand something most people never do. Power is not in control over others. Power is in control over yourself. It's in knowing when to speak, and when your silence will say more. It's in knowing when to stay, and when your absence will say everything. It's in knowing that your reaction is your most expensive currency, and you don't spend it cheaply anymore. You've become a woman who no longer needs chaos to feel important. You don't seek revenge. Your healing is the revenge. You don't do revenge. You don't scream your worth. Your energy speaks before your words do. And that's why people can feel you, even when you say nothing, especially when you say nothing. Because here's the truth. She who controls herself controls the room.
She doesn't let her triggers own her. She doesn't let disrespect drag her out of character. She doesn't need to be loud. She is loud in her calmness. Why? Because she's not looking for validation. She is a validation. Her presence alone makes people rethink how they speak to her. Her boundaries are quiet but firm. Her energy says, I'm not for everyone, and that's exactly the point. And that's exactly the point. This kind of woman doesn't just walk into a room, she shifts the energy of it. Not because she's trying, but because she's built herself in private for too long to be shaken in public. This control, it didn't come from books or podcasts or quotes on Instagram. It came from nights when she wanted to scream but stayed silent. It came from days when she wanted to go back but kept walking. It came from times when she wanted to react but chose her future instead. She's built a level of self-respect that no one can take from her. Because it wasn't given, it was earned. Through tears, through lessons, through walking away. And now she's not afraid to be misunderstood. She's not afraid to lose people. She's not afraid to be alone because she's already met the most important person in her life, herself. And that relationship, it's unshakable. That's why she doesn't play games. She doesn't need to. She doesn't fight for a spot in anyone's life because she's the table, the seat, and the entire room. She doesn't chase love, she attracts it by being aligned, healed, and self-possessed. She doesn't react to disrespect. She doesn't react to disrespect, she simply disappears. Because her energy is not a weapon, it's a boundary. And when you become this woman, when you no longer hand your emotions to everyone who reaches for them, when you sit with yourself before you speak, you begin to operate from a higher plane. You don't respond to every text. You don't argue to be right. You don't perform to be chosen. You rest, you observe, you decide, you decide. Because being in control of yourself isn't about being emotionless. It's about knowing which emotions are worth honoring and which are meant to pass through. It's about being able to feel deeply without losing your sense of direction. Because now you know not everything that feels urgent is important. Not everything that feels triggering is true. Not everything that feels triggering is true. Not everything that demands your attention deserves it. This is emotional luxury. This is inner love. This is a kind of beauty that no one can see, but everyone can feel. The woman who controls herself walks slowly. She's not in a rush to respond, not in a rush to explain, not in a rush to impress. Because she knows her worth isn't tied to performance. It's tied to presence. She doesn't flinch at silence. She doesn't panic at distance. She doesn't lower her standards out of fear. Why? Because when you've built a home within yourself, you stop begging to be invited into places that don't honor you. You stop settling. You stop shrinking. You stop shrinking. You stop proving. And here's what happens next. The room adjusts to you. People speak softer around you. They carry themselves with more respect. They notice what they used to ignore, your energy, your boundaries, your silence, because self-control is intimidating. Not everyone can handle a woman who chooses herself. Not everyone knows what to do when they can no longer push her buttons. Not everyone deserves access to a woman who governs herself like a queen, with quiet strength and undeniable grace. This is the final level. This is the final level. This is the woman who doesn't just talk about healing, she embodies it. She who controls herself controls the room, not by power games, but by energetic authority. Not by being loud, but by being in alignment. Not by proving, but by knowing. And that knowing of who you are, what you allow, what you protect, that is what makes you unstoppable. Because when you become this version of yourself, you become the standard. People adjust your energy, not the other way around. So if you are still in your process, still healing, still reacting, still feeling shaky when disrespected, don't judge yourself. Don't judge yourself. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are not weak. You are just in the middle of your becoming. Keep going, keep pausing, keep choosing silence over chaos. Keep protecting your energy like it's gold. Because it is. And one day, without even trying, you will walk into a room and the energy will shift. You won't need to say a word. You won't need to explain your value. You won't need to prove your piece. You'll simply exist. In control, in alignment, in power, and the room will feel it. Because the woman who controls herself controls everything. Controls everything. If this helped you step into your power, subscribe. Your highest self is waiting.